The moon was nothing but a pale smear behind thick clouds, casting no light on the acres of corn that surrounded the Miller farm. The stalks stood tall and black against the sky, whispering with the wind like 1,000 hushed voices. Thomas Miller ran through them, his boots pounding the hard earth, each breath tearing at his throat. He clutched the old 12-gauge shotgun in both hands, the cold metal slick with sweat. Something was in the rows behind him, not running, not charging, just keeping pace. The dry rustle of the stalks moved with him, perfectly matching his speed. "Dad!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Dad! They're here!" The wind swallowed his words. A shadow slipped across the narrow path ahead, gone before he could blink. The rows pressed in around him, the stalks leaning as if listening. He didn't dare look back. The farmhouse lights were faint in the distance, a lonely glow in a sea of darkness. Thomas pushed harder, legs screaming, lungs burning. The whispers grew louder now, closer, too many voices to count, murmuring in a language that wasn't meant for human ears. He broke through the last row and stumbled into the yard, nearly dropping the gun. The porch light buzzed overhead, drawing a circle of weak yellow safety on the dirt. His father burst through the screen door, holding a rifle. "Jesus, Tom, what's going on?" "They," Thomas gasped, clutching his knees. "They came early. It's not harvest yet, but they're here." From the corn, something answered, a long, low exhale, like breath passing over the mouth of an empty bottle. Then silence. Thomas looked at his father, eyes wide, lips trembling. "We don't have time." The porch light flickered once, twice, and then it went out. 2 weeks earlier, the Miller farm looked like something from an old postcard. Wide fields, a weathered red barn, and a white farmhouse with peeling paint that gave it charm rather than shame. The days were long, filled with the rhythm of work. Samuel Miller, the father, was a man of few words and steady hands. His life was a cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. Thomas, his 22-year-old son, had returned from the city after a failed attempt at college, now helping his father keep the place afloat. They rose with the sun. Breakfast was always the same: eggs, bacon, coffee so strong it could strip paint. The days passed in labor, the kind that left your muscles sore but your mind quiet. But the nights were different. It started subtly. The dogs, Buddy and Rex, began barking more often after sunset. Not the frantic, high-pitched bark of excitement, but a deep, guttural sound that made the hair rise on the back of Thomas's neck. One night, as he was closing the barn doors, Thomas thought he heard someone walking between the corn rows, slow, deliberate steps. He'd called out, thinking it was maybe one of the Henderson boys from the neighboring farm, but the sound had stopped immediately. When he told his father, Samuel dismissed it. Foxes, raccoons, could be anything. But Thomas noticed that his father began keeping the rifle by the door after that. By the end of August, the corn was tall enough to block the view of the horizon. The air felt heavy, the kind of heat that clung to your skin and made every breath thick. One morning, Thomas found strange tracks in the dirt between the rows. They weren't animal tracks. Too wide, too long, almost like a barefoot human's. But each print had an unnatural curve, as if the foot had too many joints. That night, the dogs refused to go outside. The next morning, they were gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, just empty collars lying in the yard. Thomas searched the fields until his legs ached, calling their names until his voice went raw. But the corn seemed endless, swallowing his shouts. Samuel said nothing, just stared at the rows with a tight jaw, as if weighing a decision. 3 days later, Thomas woke in the middle of the night to a faint tapping on his bedroom window. His room was on the second floor. It happened just after midnight. The sky was a sheet of black. No stars, no moon. Thomas lay in bed staring at the ceiling when he heard it. The sound of something brushing against the siding, like fingers trailing along the wood. Then the tapping again. He got up, heart pounding, and went to the window. The glass was cold under his palm. At first he saw nothing, just the dark shape of the barn and the endless wall of corn beyond it. Then, from between the stalks, a figure stepped out. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs thin and too long, swaying gently as if moved by a wind Thomas couldn't feel. The head tilted upward, and even from that distance, Thomas felt its gaze lock on him. He stumbled back, grabbing the shotgun from beside his bed. By the time he looked again, the figure was gone. The corn was still. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Samuel found Thomas sitting on the porch, eyes bloodshot. Thomas told him what he'd seen. Samuel listened quietly, then went inside and returned with a dusty leather-bound book. It was a family journal, going back generations. In its pages were accounts from past harvests, strange sightings, missing livestock, unexplained deaths, always in late summer, always just before the harvest. They take what they want, Samuel said. Sometimes it's animals, sometimes... He didn't finish. Thomas asked why they stayed. Samuel looked at the fields and said, "Because running doesn't help. They follow." It began with the wind. At sunset, the corn started to sway. Though the air was still, the sound was like breathing. In, out, slow and deliberate. From the rows emerged shapes, dozens of them, each as tall as the corn, their limbs bending wrong, their heads cocked at unnatural angles. They moved in silence, except for the soft hiss of their passage through the stalks. The millers barricaded the house, boarding the windows, loading their weapons. But the shapes didn't attack. They simply stood at the edge of the yard, watching as the night deepened. Hours passed. Then, one by one, the shapes sank back into the corn, vanishing as if they had never been there. The following night they came again, but this time they did not stop at the edge. The first one reached the porch in seconds, moving with a sudden insect-like burst of speed. The boards groaned under its weight. Thomas fired point blank, but the thing barely reacted, its body folding unnaturally as it lurched forward. The house filled with noise, pounding on the walls, footsteps in the attic, the crash of glass breaking upstairs. Samuel shouted for Thomas to get to the barn, to start the truck, to get away. But when Thomas reached the door, the corn itself seemed to close in, the rows twisting and merging, cutting off every escape. The shapes closed in from all sides. Thomas woke to silence. The sun was rising, painting the fields gold. The house was empty. No sign of his father, no sign of struggle. The corn swayed gently in the morning breeze. He stumbled outside, calling his father's name, but his voice felt swallowed by the air. In the middle of the field, the stalks parted. Something stepped out, not tall this time, but small. It was Buddy, the dog. Or, it looked like Buddy, But its eyes were black, bottomless. It turned and walked back into the corn. Thomas followed. The rows closed behind him.